The bowl season is over, and what's the first thing that happens right after the last game of the season? Usually anyway. Yes, we get to hear from our ever charismatic EVP in Arturas Karnisovas for his end of season press conference. Ever charismatic was obviously sarcasm in case you didn't pick up on that, but the end of season presser was very underwhelming, uneventful, and uninspiring, so it went about as well as you would expect as we've become familiar with these press conferences that go with AK, especially after another season missing the playoffs. Now, we did also get to hear from a handful of players, even including Lonzo Ball, and there were some key takeaways, sound bites that I thought were worth highlighting and discussing, which I'll talk about in this video. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, one thing I've continued to say about AK, and this is coming from someone who isn't as critical as some have been in how he runs this team, but if there was ever one thing he needed to get better at, among a lot of things, it's media training and the way he interacts with the media, because I'm sure he's not dumb. I'm sure it's just his personality of being kind of a quiet, reserved guy. I'm sure it's also the fact that English isn't his first language, but you have to sound a little more upbeat than that when you're talking to the media. As a leader, you have to inspire confidence in not only the fans, but also the players, that even if things maybe aren't going that well, you can at least trust that your leader knows what he's doing. I mean, the amount of ums and I thinks from that press conference, the monotone voice, his voice trailing off in a lot of its responses, like, to me, it almost comes off like he's in over his head and there isn't anything he can do about it, and he just wants to crawl away and hide from the media because they know he's going to eat him alive when he goes out there. Like, at least try and demonstrate confidence in these press conferences, even if it's all BS. It's a bad look. Like, part of the job of the GM is also knowing how to speak to the media, being articulate in your plan and vision for the team, and that has just never really been there for AK throughout his tenure running this team. Now, AK did start off his presser with a brief statement. It wasn't as long as some of the other ones that he's had in the past, and it was a little less prepared and unscripted, where he would just read from a piece of paper the whole time. But he talked about how the team wanted to accomplish 4 goals, which in his view they achieved, that being changing their style of play, retaining their 2025 pick, which I doubt that was really the goal going into the season, given they said it wasn't going to be a focus of theirs, but okay, build the roster by targeting young players with experience, which they did, and focus on internal development, which, to give them credit, there was some of that, especially with Modest and Giddey. He also talked about their financial flexibility going into the summer of 2026, which is true at the moment anyway, but keep in mind, they're going to have to pay Giddey and Kobe before then. Now, one thing I did appreciate and wasn't expecting was that AK said this isn't where they want to be, and even acknowledged that the 15-5 finish to the season was nice, but it's not a victory lap by any means. I thought for sure he was going to be doing a lot of patting on the back of that finish and constantly referencing that 15-5 record. He did also ask the fans for patience, which, okay, but since you've been in this role, the Bulls have made the playoffs once and have only won one playoff game to show for it. But mention this is the first year of this new transition. Again, still refuses to call it a rebuild, but there are a lot of positives that came from this season, and they're going to continue to build with this group by adding a player in the lottery and free agency. But the thing that stood out to me most from this press conference was AK talking about how they're trying to minimize their timeline by going this route of acquiring young players with experience. But then when he was asked about the actual timeline and how long he expects it to take to get back into contention, he said he can't define the actual timeline. And to me, I mean, it's quotes like this that don't inspire confidence, because it makes it seem like you don't have a strategy or plan for what you're even trying to do. Like, the man better have a full-fledged strategy and a plan in place. You're the head of this team, getting paid millions of dollars to do this. You better be on top of your game in running this organization. And when you hear stuff like this, I'm just like, does this man even know what he's doing? A few other random takeaways. AK was asked if he was being recruited at all for the job in Denver, which he said no. Not that I would expect him to say yes, even if he was. Now, when it comes to the players, though, we heard from Josh Giddey first, and I will say I'm always impressed with Giddey's mindset and how he addresses the media. He's very self-aware, holds himself accountable, knows what he needs to do to get better. He called out that, at the beginning of the season, he was overthinking things a bit and trying too hard to fit in and didn't want to ruffle feathers for how the offense was being run, but started feeling much more like himself in the back half of the year. Said he's going to be going back home to Australia and will rest up for the next couple of weeks before getting back into training for this upcoming season. Lonzo, we got to hear from Lonzo. He mentioned he won't be needing surgery on that wrist that kept him out for the second half of the year, which is good to hear, and said that he'll have a full offseason of training and that his knee is doing fine. Io spoke about his injury and surgery. If you saw the interview, he's out of that shoulder brace, and the plan is to start for him to get ready for 5-on-5 again by August, which will be well before training camp, so that's also good to hear. The media also talked to Vucevic for a while, a lot of questions for Vuce. The thing that stood out to me most for Vuce was obviously, he was asked whether he thinks he's going to remain with this team through the end of his contract, which is set to expire next season. And he mentioned how at this stage in his career, he wants to win now, make a deep run into the playoffs, which of course isn't where the Bulls are at this point in time. Talked about how he'll discuss with the front office their approach and strategy, and if that's the goal, then they're in good shape. He did say he believes there are pieces that they can build upon and liked what he saw from this young team in the last couple of months of the season. But yeah, I mean, to me, this is a polite way of Vuce saying he's looking to go elsewhere, to be on a team that is going to be able to contend and isn't really interested in being part of a youth movement at this stage in his career, which is expected. And look, if this was last offseason, I would have said there isn't a chance the Bulls are going to be able to find a trade for Vuce, and they're more or less stuck with him. But on an expiring contract, a very tradable contract, and for a player that had a much better season, a significantly better shooting season, I do think the Bulls will be able to find a trade for him, whether it's, in the summer or before the trade deadline. It's not going to be much. I mean, they'll get lucky to get a second-round pick for him, but it's something. And I mean, as critical as some of us have been about Vuce, I actually hope he's able to go to a situation that works out best for him. Unlike Zach LaVine, which is a whole other topic. I feel bad for Zach, man. I really do. I'll have a video out on that topic on my NBA channel, so be on the lookout for that. And then, of course, we got to hear from Kobe. Obviously, Kobe was asked about his potential contract extension, which he said he wasn't focused on. I'm sure he is, but it's the right thing to say to the media. And what I appreciated was he said he was more focused on being present and there for his teammates instead of focusing on his upcoming contract extension. He did add that talks obviously will happen with his people, his camp, about potentially hitting unrestricted free agency in 2026 rather than signing an early extension, but that'll happen down the line. Kobe saying his teammates' praises, says he wants to continue to get better and grow, that he's always looking for ways to improve upon his weaknesses. When asked about what potential players would need to be placed around him to really get the most out of his skills, he said, candidly, I don't know, man, I'm not a GM. I love Kobe and always keeping up his humor even in times like these. Overall, I liked what a lot of the players had to say. They were very reflective in their responses, took accountability, were very self-aware and what needs to be fixed and changed. I wasn't too pleased from what I heard from AK, but then again, I also have very low expectations going into this end of season press conference. Anyway, those were some of the key takeaways from the press conference. Feel free to check out the full interviews on the Bulls YouTube page. As always, guys, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.